No, your computer or cellular device or whatever streaming device or platform you are using is not lying to you. This is Small Ball live for the first time in a while, in a good while. I think it's been about, I want to say, 2 months, something in that vicinity. But we're back as always. The thing about Small Ball is like we have some hiatuses, hiati or whatever the word is, but we always seem to find our way back to the live streams and to bring you, my viewers, some premium baseball content. And we have a packed show today. Oh boy, do we have a packed show today. But before we get into that, I want to thank you for joining me. I'm, of course, as always, going to notify the world that we're live. Because for some odd reason, there are people out there right now who are not watching Small Ball. Can't really explain to you why that may be, but I'm going to do them all a favor and remind them of what they are missing at this moment. We are live. It's okay. So, here we are. Pleasure to be back. I'm going to conclude the show with some logistical stuff, but I don't want to waste time with it now because we have a lot to talk about. And I'm not gonna hide anything from you guys and girls. We will be talking about Trevor Bauer, of course. You all know that. Okay, I don't need to tell you that. But I want to start with something else. So if you're confused as to why I'm not talking about Trevor Bauer, to start the show, it'll become clear as we go. We'll definitely get to it. But here's what I want to start with today. Trevor Bauer to come. But we'll segue into it. I want to talk about a particular baseball team that resides in the New York metropolitan area. Okay? So generally speaking, when I talk about such a team, they reside in the Bronx, one of the 5 boroughs of that metropolitan area. And as others do as well, I think the Yankees are certainly the more prominent team in the media as far as talking points. But today, it's another team that I'd like to discuss. And you may have guessed it, the New York Mets. There is so much Mets stuff to talk about. I can't get to all of it today, but I'll get to some of it. Here we go. The Mets are in a different situation than they've been in, I would say, since at least 2007 and maybe all the way back to 1986. Mets fans should be the happiest they've been, baseball-wise. I would argue since 2007, maybe even longer than that. Here's why. You might assume I'm talking about a change in ownership, and that certainly plays a role. But here's the thing. A lot of people have been talking about Steve Cohen coming in to the Mets organization and how he is going to deliver a new structure, right? A new winning culture. And sure, yeah, maybe. But that's not what I would be excited about if I'm a Mets fan, because he hasn't shown. He said that he's willing to do all that stuff. He hasn't really shown that yet at all. Not that he's shown otherwise, but we don't know, right? Yes, it's an exciting prospect for new ownership to come in and replace the old ownership that wasn't really delivering wins in any way, shape, or form. But only time will tell if it's going to be significantly better, if at all. So let's put that aside for a sec. That's really not relevant to our Mets discussion today. What I really think Mets fans should be excited about, and what I'm excited about as a New York resident, because yes, the Mets play about 30 minutes by train from my house, maybe 40 if there's a little bit slower on the weekends or whatever. But I'm excited when the Mets are playing well. Baseball is buzzing in New York, right? Because the Yankees always have excitement around them. Whether they're good or bad, and they're never really bad. So whether they're good or average, there's always excitement. But when there are two teams that are generating excitement, it makes baseball a lot more fun in the Big Apple. So the elephant in the room is they trade for Francisco Lindor. Okay, and why is that so important? Because it is, right? And as you may know, if you've seen Small Ball before, I'm not so interested in assembling talent and analyzing it, right? From an analysis perspective, from an analytical perspective, analytical used a little bit liberally there, but from an analysis perspective, I'm not so interested in taking each individual player on a team, figuring out how talented they are, and adding it up to generate the sum of their talent, because I don't see that as that relevant. Here's why. The Mets are in a unique situation by their standards now, because they've had a lot of talent for a long time. They really have. If you go in and look at it, they really have not had a lack of talent. They've had 2 to 3 at any given time starting pitchers who they had hoped would become all-star level frontline aces. And some did, right? DeGrom certainly. Syndergaard at one point was producing at that level. Offensively, right? People talk about the pitching and how the offense never really caught up. Well, it never really caught up, but not because of a lack of talent. Michael Conforto has been on the Mets roster for years and years and years now, okay? Obviously, the influx of new talent via Pete Alonso, right? J.D. Davis potentially. They've had players who had the ability to produce and didn't. Well, why is that? Well, the Mets are one of those franchises that just seem like they can't get anything right. And there's this weird narrative around that. Like in every sport, there are those franchises, right? That regardless of how much talent they have, and I think the Mets have had at least playoff level talent, at certain points over the last 10, maybe even 20 years. Why are there certain teams that just don't figure it out? And I think for each of those teams, there is a separate reason. But we don't really go into those reasons because we just kind of assume that the Mets aren't going to be a contender. And I think that's largely correct. Okay. I don't think that the Mets adding really talented players is going to equal success. Here's why. They have had similar rosters over the last 20 years. Again, not a lack of talent, but a huge, glaring hole when it comes to veteran leadership. Think about this. All of their premier talent over the last, I'll say since 2007, so 14 years, okay? All of their premier talent has been young and not to their prime quite yet. The likes of Pete Alonso right now, the likes of Michael Conforto when he came up as a young player and then didn't quite reach the potential that Mets fans hoped for. So all of their best and highest producing players are seemingly not at their peaks yet over the last 15 years. Why does that matter? Here's why that matters. Because they have never had a veteran core of leadership to guide them into a situation where they can have postseason levels, let's say, of success. It's really relevant because when a player like a Michael Conforto or now a Pete Alonso, still on their rookie contracts, still trying to figure out what they can become, because we can project that on them. We can say Pete Alonso is going to be this or that, but he doesn't even know himself. It's really difficult then to focus on making everyone around you better. That's not to say that you have to be selfish if you're a young player, because many of them aren't. Pete Alonso is a very unselfish, very, very unselfish teammate, very good teammate who contributes to a positive culture. But it's really difficult, and some may argue impossible. I wouldn't say impossible, but it's close, to have a lasting impact on, the rest of a roster who's not quite at that level in order to generate postseason success. The only player that I've seen able to do that in the last 10 years, let's say, I can think of two. I can think of one who's done it, and I can think of another who is about to do it. And that's why Aaron Judge, I think, over the last 4 years, I have seen him as an underrated player in many ways. Now, I think he's adequately rated because I think his talent is overrated, but his intangible abilities are underrated. But that's a story for another day. Let's not get off topic. The other one would be Fernando Tatis. I think he has done a remarkable job in his young career of being able to impact the players around him. Let's get back to the topic at hand, though. The Mets have had significant talent over the last 15 years. They really have. But they've never had players in their prime or later to be able to guide them through it. Again, it's really hard for a young player, a Pete Alonso, for example, to blossom into his full potential and simultaneously make everyone around him better. Maybe that's why an Aaron Judge hasn't quite reached where we had hoped he would be. Now they do. Francisco Lindor is the best acquisition the Mets have had maybe ever. Because now, of course, they add his talent, which anybody can see how that could help them in terms of postseason success. But this is the first time since 2007 that they have had a veteran star player in his prime with excellent intangible and leadership abilities. Back in 2007, you had Carlos Beltran. And again, they didn't even, they haven't won since 1986, right? But I'm not even talking about winning a championship. The Mets, regardless of how much talent they can put together individually, people underestimate the value of those figures, okay? Were the Mets to acquire, instead of Francisco Lindor, 2 or even 3 more very good young players, that does not, in my eyes, equal postseason success. And my evidence of that's what they've been doing for 15 years. People don't realize that because it doesn't equate to wins. But when you break it down, they have been consistently adding pretty premier young talent, to be honest. I mean, a Brandon Nimmo, okay? Again, a Michael Conforto, now Pete Alonso, right? Jeff McNeil. There are real young, good players here that if this was a video game, right? If human interaction wasn't a factor, that level of talent would add up to way more wins and way more success than it does in real life, where they don't have a veteran figure that is going to finally crack the code for that franchise. Francisco Lindor is exactly that guy. I don't have to spend a lot of time explaining that because he is an outstanding player, undoubtedly the best shortstop in the game. Let's not kid ourselves. Okay, more on that later, I guess. But in my eyes, it's really not a question. But from an intangible perspective, he's won a pennant. He was runner-up in the World Baseball Classic, a team that he largely, as a young player, was, you could even argue, the captain of, or something close to it. The Mets haven't had a figure like this since 2007 or even longer. I don't know if their veterans back in 2007 were quite as valuable intangibly as Lindor. The Mets are in a great, great spot right now. The only problem for them is they're in the toughest division in baseball without question. And I'm not going to get into ranking those teams right now because that's a story for another day. But the Mets should expect to be playing games in October this year, in my opinion. Now, let's segue a bit, because if you're a Mets fan and you're watching this right now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Trust me. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, we do look pretty good, but if only we had gotten Trevor Bauer. I'm going to stop talking for like 7 seconds. I think that was about 7. That 7-second span was an opportunity for you to process what I just said. Okay. Almost every competitive team went after Trevor Bauer, at least, looked into the financials and how they could make a deal work. Okay. How could you not? Right? No harm in pursuing it, at least a little bit. And the Dodgers have won the sweepstakes. Okay. 3-year deal with an option, so potentially a 4-year deal. He'll be making $45 million in 2021. Let's ignore the money for a second, because I don't even think that's relevant. I really don't even think it's relevant, the value of that contract. I'm not talking about, so far everybody that I've heard that is anti the Trevor Bauer signing, it's for financial reasons. There are way more layers to that, and here they are. The Dodgers just gave every other National League team a chance to win the pennant. Because without adding Trevor Bauer, I'm not sure, with maybe the exception of the Braves, and you'll say the Padres, but I really don't think so. I don't think any of them had a chance to win the pennant before Saturday, when the Dodgers signed Trevor Bauer. I'm not gonna beat around the bush anymore. I'm not going to sugarcoat it anymore. Okay? I'm gonna get to the crux of how I feel about Trevor Bauer as a baseball player without hiding any of my opinions. The Dodgers are worse today than they were Friday, because Trevor Bauer has just reversed all of the great work they did last year to finally break through. Let's rewind a little bit. 2017, 18, 19. What did I say to you guys, my small ball viewers, about the Dodgers for about 4 years straight? Those of you who knew me before the likes of small ball would have even more insight into what I'm talking about. But what was the problem? Why were they not breaking through? And why did I continue to predict, and predict correctly, I might add, that they would not have long postseason success? Well, it was quite simple. The culture of the Dodgers was kind of similar to that of the Mets in some ways, but it was pretty young. It was very immature. And it was extremely stagnant. There was no versatility. There was no diversity whatsoever. It was about 8 to 9 left-handed hitters swinging for the fences. And in the postseason, it not quite working out. But we're talking about Trevor Bauer. He's a pitcher. So what about the pitchers? We had Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler. Okay. Now you add Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer, like we've said on the show many times, has a losing record over the last 2 years. Don't tell me record doesn't matter, because I'm not going to listen to that. To make it worse, in the postseason, Trevor Bauer in his career is 1-4. 1-4. Okay. So again, he just earned himself $45 million for next year. Okay. Coming off a season in which he was 5-4, if you include his loss in the postseason, 5-5. The previous year, he was 11-12. He has had 2 seasons in his 7-year career that have been above average. Seriously, go look at it. His season in 2018 happened to be outstanding, which is what earned him this contract, in addition to very, very good surface numbers last year in 2020. I mean, he led the league in ERA. There's certainly something to be said for that. And there's no denying the talent there. But the difference maker for the Dodgers last year, the reason why they finally were able to break through, because again, like the Mets, they have had exuberant talent over the last 4 years and were collapsing in the postseason. The reason why they're finally able to break through this year was the change in culture. Bellinger's maturing. He is one of those younger players that is able to have a very positive impact on a team, but he wasn't quite there, okay? Kind of like a Pete Alonso. He wasn't quite there because he was still trying to figure out what he was himself as a player. But then they add Mookie Betts, and the franchise completely flipped on its head, right? They had enough talent to win. This is like what I'm talking about with the Mets. They had enough talent to win. They don't even need to add more talent. Of course, it helps. What they really needed was a human being by the name of Mookie Betts just to be in that dugout, locker room, and on the field. Of course, his production helped as well. But now they add Trevor Bauer. More production, more talent that they don't need. They obviously don't need it because they won the World Series last year. And you could say, obviously, how does talent hurt your team? How does the addition of talent hurt your team? It doesn't. But there are layers to it. Trevor Bauer has been trolling teams, okay? He has been leaking information about where he was thinking of going for a year now. A year. We've been talking about Trevor Bauer. Think about this. This is not Mike Trout, okay? This is not Babe Ruth. This is Trevor Bauer. We have been talking about the Trevor Bauer free agency for a year now. This is a player who was 5-5 last year and has a losing record over the last 2 seasons. Okay? He has been so focused on his free agency and not even like the baseball side of it. He is let's put it this way. I'm not surprised he ended up in LA, and I'm not so sure he is either. Because he is so focused on attention and so focused on himself as a celebrity and expanding himself, off the field, and that's fine. But that's not going to add wins for the Dodgers, okay? Find me a player who has the charisma on the mound or at the plate of Trevor Bauer that has had postseason success or any success. I mean, let's break it down. Who are the greatest players in the league right now? We're talking Mike Trout, okay? Aaron Judge. Pitching side, Jacob deGrom, Garrett Cole. Are any of those guys throwing, the ball over the center field fence after a mid-August outing against the Kansas City Royals? Are any of those guys throwing around gloves and water coolers in the dugout? Are any of those guys calling out their lineups? Are any of those guys leaking information a year in advance about each of the 16 or 17 teams that they may be considering to generate popularity for their YouTube channels? No. Coincidentally, he has a teammate now named Clayton Kershaw. Okay? He has had a little bit of fire on the mound at times, a little bit of frustration. Baseball is not a game where emotions help you. There are games like that. Baseball is not one of them. Clayton Kershaw is a supreme talent. I think the most talented pitcher of this generation. He has had little to no postseason success. The only success he's had in the postseason was the last season where there were no fans in the crowd. Think about that. And now they add Trevor Bauer, who's similarly talented and has similar flaws intangibly. They have just created for themselves a potential problem, the Dodgers have. By adding more talent that they really don't need, they are sacrificing the incredible culture that they have somehow been able to build despite having a lineup of 24, 25, 26-year-old players, a staff led by third-year Walker Buehler. Now they take Walker Buehler out of that role. He now has to slide down to the 2 to make room for YouTube star Trevor Bauer. The whole locker room now has to make room for the $45 million guy. And this $45 million guy, this particular player, has a losing record over the last 2 years. In my opinion, the Mets dodged an absolute bullet here. Because what did I say was their problem? It was culture. It wasn't a negative culture. It was the lack of a positive culture. It was a very neutral culture over the last 15 years for the Mets. Now they add Lindor, and that completely changes. Had the Mets been able to snag Trevor Bauer, that's a different story. Now we're in dangerous situations if we're the Mets. They dodged a bullet. He goes to the Dodgers, LA, where his YouTube channel can thrive. And that's what he is. He's a big personality with a lot of talent, and he doesn't win baseball games. He wins about half. He wins about half his baseball games. And they're relying on him for $45 million next year to carry them to a championship. They just created a potential problem, okay? If you think about it, there's no need. They have the talent. There are young guys who are improving for them to be able to even build upon what they had last year. And now they have created a toxic environment, potentially, that they really don't need. They really don't need it. If it's a team like, let's say, the Rays, who have never really been able to generate a strong culture, largely because of their weak fan base, to be honest. I mean, really, really tough to win in Tampa Bay. Maybe they take a chance. If it's a team like the Twins, who are supremely talented, with a good culture, but it's a little bit stagnant, right? Last couple of years, not really able to get over the hump. Maybe they take a chance. But the Dodgers just squandered their complete outright favorite to win the National League pennant and maybe the World Series. They just gave everyone else a chance. And the Mets dodged a bullet. With the addition of Lindor, they are a playoff team now. And Bauer would complicate things unnecessarily. Trevor Bauer started his career in Arizona, but really started his career in Cleveland. Now he's in LA. He imploded in Cleveland. Cleveland was too big of a city for him. Cleveland. He mentally imploded. Now he's coming to LA. The favorite to win the World Series. Coming off a really good year. With a big contract. A lot of potential issues here, intangibly speaking, with this addition for the Dodgers. To wrap up the show. Something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And something that I think is going to be pretty interesting. My MLB all overrated team. We talk about overrated players a lot on this show, as we should. I think it's quite interesting. We'll do an underrated team too, but enough wasting time. I want to get my team on record the most overrated player at each position. Here we go. Some of them were tough. Some of them were very, very tough. But here we go. My all overrated team, each position. Here we go. Starting pitcher. Little segue here. Don't think that you guys have to do too much investigation into who it might be. It's Trevor Bauer. I don't think we need to explain that because I just spent about 32 minutes and 7, 8, 9 seconds describing my thoughts. Trevor Bauer is not a winner. He is more personality than success. And he wins about half of his baseball games. And he just made $45 million. Catcher. Yes, it's still Gary Sanchez. It is. Despite the huge drop-off in his allure, right? In his reputation. Huge drop-off. He is now seen as somehow still an average to slightly below average catcher. No, people, let's not kid ourselves. He is the worst starting catcher in Major League Baseball. The worst. There is no catcher who is worse than Gary Sanchez as a starter. There is not one. There is not one. And it's really not hard to come to that conclusion. It's the most important defensive position, besides pitcher, obviously. He is the worst at that. And the one thing that he's supposed to be doing to make up for that is rake. And he has done the complete opposite of that. He has been a 200 hitter over his last 3 seasons. And to make it worse, his ERA, catcher's ERA, so the ERA when he's catching for the pitchers, was a half point higher than that of Austin Romine back in 2019, and almost a full point higher than that of Kyle Higashioka last year. So the pitchers don't pitch well when he's behind the plate. He doesn't catch well when he's behind the plate. And he doesn't hit well when he's at the plate. Gary Sanchez is still supremely overrated. Yes. First base. Sorry, Yankee fans. It's Luke Voit. It is. Somehow he has propelled himself into like top 5 first baseman conversations. Certainly top 10. Almost every top 10 I've seen has him on it, which is miraculous to me. 2019, the strikeout Yankees, who were one of the biggest swing and miss teams of all time, if not the biggest, was led in strikeouts by Luke Voit. He has done nothing productive defensively. He has not had any significant postseason success. He's a career 274 hitter, career 891 OPS. That's what he does well. That's his role. He deserves credit for that. But outside of that, really not a lot of production. 9th in MVP voting last year with a 277 batting average, 54 strikeouts in 56 games, and bottom 5 defense at first base. He is not a top 10 first baseman. I think he's about average, if that. Second base. Similarly, every top 10 or top 15 or whatever the case may be, list that I've seen somehow has a name in there that does not belong, and it's Brandon Lowe. When did Brandon Lowe become a top 5 second baseman? Because it wasn't last year, it wasn't the year before, and it wasn't his rookie year in 2018. Because he's a career 262 hitter with an 855 OPS, no defensive success to speak of. 8th in MVP voting last year, he hit 269 with 58 strikeouts in 56 games. That's more strikeouts than games played. In 2019, 270, 850 OPS, 113 strikeouts in 82 games. Again, no defensive success to speak of. I really don't get this one. Luke Voit, I can see. He plays a role. He's a power hitter, and he's pretty good at what he does. Brandon Lowe doesn't have any outstanding traits and is downright bad in contact and defense. He's overrated for sure. Third base. Tough one. Very tough. Because I couldn't really find anybody that I thought was significantly overrated. But, and this is going to counter a lot of what I say on this show, but it's Matt Chapman. And I know what you're thinking. I love defense more than anybody else. I'm a big defense guy. I value defense higher than most people do. And yes, Matt Chapman is the best defensive third baseman in the American League, arguably the entire MLB. But don't you need to be able to like hit the ball to be thought of as like the league's best third baseman? Just a little bit. Career 255 batting average. Last year, 232. Last year, he hit 232. 54 strikeouts in 37 games. 2019, 249, 848 OPS. 6th in MVP voting. Hitting 249 with an 848 OPS. He's an outstanding defensive player. But a lot of people have been talking about him as the best third baseman in baseball. Major disrespect to the likes of Nolan Arenado. And at this point, I would even say Manny Machado. Both of whom are also really, really strong and productive defensive players and can actually hit the baseball. Shortstop. Again, I don't want to disrespect Matt Chapman too much. I don't think he's very overrated. I just think that he's an offensive player. And overall, he's not a top 3 third baseman in the league. Shortstop. Very tough. I couldn't honestly think of anybody that I saw as almost, I really almost couldn't find anybody that I thought was overrated. I tossed around some names, and this kind of feels like a cop-out to me, but I have to go, unfortunately, and I like him a lot, I have to go with Trevor Story. Again, it feels like a cop-out because we obviously have the Colorado situation here, and that's the only reason for it, but it is relevant. It's very relevant. I think he is an outstanding player, underrated defensively, but a lot of people have him as the top shortstop right now or even top 3. I hate to break it to you guys. Again, I like him a lot, so I hate to break it to you, but in games that he hasn't played at Coors Field, he's hitting 250 with a 760 OPS. That's about average, almost exactly average in both respects. Only 50 home runs in 299 games away from Coors Field. 395 strikeouts in 299 games away from Coors Field. I think he's a great defender. He's an outstanding base runner. He's fast and has great great base running instincts. But Trevor Story, away from Coors Field, is an average player, honestly. I mean, because he's really, really good defensively. I think he's below average offensively. Maybe he's a little above average because I like his intangibles. I love his base running, and his defense is really, really elite. But he's not a top 3 shortstop. Left field. Left field's kind of tough because it's like, I don't know. It just, it kind of feels like if you're not a center fielder, then you're a right fielder. If you're not a right fielder, then you're a left fielder. But there is a left fielder who's supremely overrated, and it's Mark Canha of the Oakland A's. Kind of like Brandon Lowe. Remind me when he became like an elite baseball player, because it wasn't last year when he hit 246 with a 795 OPS, 54 strikeouts in 59 games, egregiously bad defense in the outfield. He's a first baseman. He does not belong in the outfield. And that's a little disrespectful. It's not egregiously bad, but he's not a major league outfielder. He's gotten the job done out of position, but as far as a left fielder, I don't trust him defensively. Most home runs he's ever had in a season is 26, which is supposed to be his strength. Most doubles he's ever had in a season is 22. The highest OPS he had was 913 in 2019, his best year by far. Other than that, last year was his best OPS at 795. He's a career 249 hitter, 785 OPS. Remind me when he became even an above average player, because I don't remember it happening. Center field. Yes, it's true. I'm sorry. I know you guys are going to push back. It's fine. I welcome the conversation. But yes, it's Mike Trout. And again, there's a very negative connotation around the word overrated. And it is a negative word, but overrated does not mean bad. Overrated does not even mean not an outstanding generational talent. But I have heard people say, and honestly, that Mike Trout's the best baseball player of all time. I'm literally not even going to entertain that concept. So we're just going to move on. I seriously, honestly do not think he's the best baseball player in the MLB right now. Again, we could elaborate on that another day, and we have in the past. But he's almost undoubtedly in the media the best player in baseball. If you say otherwise, people don't even take you seriously. And I don't think he's it. So Mike Trout's overrated. I gotta be honest. It's Mike Trout. Right field. Tricky. Again, so here's the thing with right field. I do want to talk about this for a second, actually. The answer is not Aaron Judge. But like I said, Aaron Judge is very, very, very underrated from an intangible perspective. Because a lot of people, here's the thing about intangibles. It's like, and I know I've said this before, but it's like everybody knows that Aaron Judge is a great team leader, intangible baseball player. Everybody knows that. And everybody acknowledges that. Yet, when we're talking about players and their values, it never comes up. Unless maybe like you're a Yankee fan who just likes him, it never comes up. I've never heard it argued for in an analysis of right fielders. Yet, I think he's very overrated in terms of what he's done on the field. Strikeouts are way too high. Yes, he's an outstanding defensive player, but a lot of people think he's like the best defensive right fielder in the league, and he's not. He has remarkable instincts, but he's just not mobile enough. And he's underperformed in really big spots. It's not him, though, because he has completely changed that culture. It was a rebuilding team, and he, as a rookie, turned it around and made it a contender. The answer is Joey Gallo. I mean, I don't think you have to read too much into it here. The new age of baseball values the ability to hit spherical objects very far from where they start. Joey Gallo is the only player in the league who strikes out more than Aaron Judge. And defensively, like, this is what gets to me, right? Because it's like people see Joey Gallo as like an elite defensive player. He's pretty good. He has a really strong throwing arm, but remind me when he became like a field general outfielder, because he did. He is an above average defensive player. He's a below average offensive player. Yes. Seriously. Think about Joey Gallo heading into the playoffs right now and having to face a stable of Garrett Cole, Walker Buehler, Trevor Bauer, the Rays bullpen, the Yankees bullpen, the Padres bullpen. It's not happening. Joey Gallo is the most overrated. Relief pitcher. I'm not going to do DH because, like, it's pretty stagnant, right? There's not really a lot to talk about there. Maybe at another time I will. But relief pitcher. Tricky, for sure. Kenley Jansen was for a while. I think people are starting to kind of see what I was talking about. I'm going to go with Liam Hendriks. And I don't really have a lot of basis for this, so I could be completely off because I don't really even know how to explain what I'm about to say, but he's an outstanding relief pitcher. I just don't think he's quite talented enough to keep it going, to continue the success that he's had. He has been dominant for the last 2 years, but I'm expecting a little bit of a down year from him for no other reason than I just don't think he has the stuff of a premier relief pitcher in the major leagues. I think he has really, really good pitchability, really good command. But to be an elite relief pitcher in this game, you need both of those things and like 2 to 3 wipeout pitches. He has none. He has a really good fastball, a well above average slider, but nothing about him really spells unhittable. And that's kind of what you need to have longevity as a reliever, as an elite reliever, that is. There are very few relievers that are able to sustain success, really, really high levels of success. I don't think he's one of them just because I don't think he has the stuff. That's going to do it for today's show. Feels good to be back. Thanks so much for tuning in. I need to get some. I've been talking for like 50 minutes straight, which I guess you could argue I always do on this show. But for some reason today, I guess I got a little more into it than usual. I don't know. But definitely going to quench my thirst pretty soon. Get some nice, some nice water going. Perhaps, some juice or something of that nature. We'll see. I'll let you know what I decide on. But I do want to close the show with some logistical stuff, and a lot is unclear, so more on this later. But I would like to get to a more structured schedule of small ball. As you can see, by the way, I'm in a different venue. My schedule is different, but there's always time for small ball. Maybe not always, but right now there's certainly time for small ball. So I would like to devise a structured schedule. Not entirely sure what that'll be, but I will let you guys know. And for now, most likely probably back Wednesday, maybe Thursday. But so much to talk about. Thanks so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, recommend, all that great stuff. If you feel inclined to do so, and have a healthy, happy, and safe rest of your Monday and rest of your week. Until I see you next, or rather, you see me next. It's the day after the Super Bowl, and last year, the day after the Super Bowl was supposed to be the premiere of Small Ball. I was planning on having my first ever show last year, the day after the Super Bowl. It didn't quite work out like that. I ended up starting a little early, but it's still a significant day in the small ball community in my eyes. So I thought today was fitting for our return, and hopefully we can keep it going. Thank you for the support. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and more great baseball coverage to come. So have a good one. Take care, and let's go small ball. Peace.